Here.
3 beloved isles.
1 beloved station, Radio Cayman.
The voice.
The heart.
The soul of the Cayman Islands.
Money Sense is brought to you by the Chamber Pension Plan. For further information, visit chamberpension.ky.
The Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan is kicking off the new year with a new website to better serve our members and a new administrator's agent that will help fulfill our vision for your pension plan. Our website, chamberpension.ky, features improved web services like a real-time chat to help answer your questions quicker and audio tips to help you plan for your retirement savings arrangement. Our new administrator's agent, Saxon Administration Limited, will benefit members through enhanced systems and IT services, allowing for a greater customer service experience. The Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan. We're here for you. If you would like to join or request further information, visit chamberpension.ky. And for information as it happens, follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram. Email admin@pensions.ky or call 745-7630.
Money Sense, bringing an informed financial perspective to the Cayman community.
A very good morning and warm welcome to Money Sense. I'm Simon Caudry, your host. I'm delighted to be interviewing 2 guests this morning who are on island for Cayman's inaugural B-Sides IT Security Conference. We are going to have internationally renowned persons in the security field either scare us witless or reassure us that things are going to be okay. Time will shortly tell. So good morning to you both. We have Mary here, who is the founding board member for the Women's Society of Cyber Jitsu, which is dedicated to bringing more women and girls into the cyber industry. She is a systems engineer for Palo Alto Networks and resides in Las Vegas.
Yes.
Excellent. Dave, you're with us as well. Thank you. Good morning. You're a global CISO advisor for Cisco Systems, or have I butchered that introduction?
Global Advisory CISO for Cisco.
Global Advisory CISO for Cisco Systems, which means?
It means that I get to travel the world talking about security in a way to further the conversation of how people do security from a strategic perspective.
There we go. I'm glad I asked you to introduce yourself on that one. So I sense my introduction would have been a lot worse. Well, let's kick off this conversation. The whole B-Sides conference is about IT security, and that's your bailiwick, isn't it? That's what you live day in, day out. So when we think about security and IT security, what is the future? What are the problems that people are trying to overcome now? What are those big picture issues that should be front and center of people's minds?
From what I think, the future is it's moving towards artificial intelligence, machine learning, and incorporating more systems into our daily lives with automation and those kind of things. That's what I specialize in. My day job is automation, and so that's definitely the route we're going. A lot of companies, a lot of organizations have tons of tools, but not enough people to use the tools and to actually help protect their organization.
So rather than the old days, perhaps, where there might have been a room full of people sort of studying what's going on and then phoning up someone who's just pressed the wrong button on their computer, you're talking about using computers to help people to help stop that or to monitor that in real time.
To help to monitor that and help to be proactive when they see stuff.
Is there a risk that artificial intelligence could go the other way in that sense?
Well, I know we've all seen the movie Terminator, so I firmly don't believe that we are at anywhere near that point. I think
sometimes a Roomba can have a mind of its own.
This is true. This is true. It can make quite a mess. The reality is it's really at the stage of an if-then-else statement right now. We are not at the point.
Explain what you mean by that.
If-then-else. So, all right. So it's like if this, then else that. It would be basically computer logic of how to look at things. So it is a way to augment a security practice as an example, so that if you have a security practice of, say, 10 people, you could then offload a lot of the repeatable tasks to an AI system or something along those lines that can help streamline the process so you can concentrate on security issues that otherwise would get overlooked or are far more salient to the conversation.
So that allows allows people time to focus on that which is the strategic, perhaps, than the mundane.
Yes, yeah. You want to move away from the perpetual dunking bird towards something that is far more strategic, for sure.
So I guess the historical issue, perhaps, is that when you look at IT security, people make mistakes because they're human, and it's the silly things that they make the mistakes on, as opposed to sometimes the complex stuff, but it's the complex stuff you don't know about until you thought it through.
Right.
So automation and machine learning is going to solve that problem, or is it going to be a partial solution to that?
It doesn't. It's a solution.
Okay.
It helps. I don't think it's going to solve it completely, because you're still going to have human interaction. There are some things that can be done completely by computers, but there are some things that you're like, wait a minute, let's automate up to a certain point and then have somebody come in and actually look at that information. So it's not going to be one of those things where you toss in some tools and your stuff is automated and you don't have to do anything ever again.
Is this when you think of the security industry, are all firms looking at this, or is it a subset of them which are smart and moving at the forefront of this area?
If they aren't looking at it, they should be.
And the practical reality, it is a subset. But with anything, the new and shiny takes a while to become a defined, repeatable process. So there are a lot of technologies that we're using today, for example, passwords to access your various accounts, that have been around since 1962 as a technological, quote-unquote, security control. And it really is a deprecated notion for a security control. So much in the same vein as AI, yes, we will get to a much better place, but it's going to take time, because humans being humans, we have opposable thumbs, but we make mistakes. And the same thing can be held with AI, where you can inadvertently introduce bias into the algorithms that you're writing. So you can have, systems that are scanning for, red hats, when in fact the blue hat comes along and they'll say, oh, that's a red hat. And I'm oversimplifying, but the problems that can manifest are basically, you can let your imagination run wild, because those algorithms are written by humans.
Right.
Well, that leads to an interesting point then. If you're using the creation of AI is a human process, humans have created it or are creating it. So the person or the people, the team that created that AI, have the capacity to be corrupted, in a sense, to allow others access to that in malicious ways. So how does one get over that sort of hurdle, which is the very system which is supposed to be automating and simplifying and taking away the human issues is actually itself created by humans, and then there are backdoors or whatever other things that are created?
Go ahead.
Okay, so for example, I'm less concerned about the malicious backdoors. They are a real problem. I'm more worried about the whoops factor of people, introducing their own personal bias into creating an algorithm, as an example, and there may be an unconscious bias. And that becomes a problem that is much in the same vein as dropping a pebble in a pond, right? It ripples out from there, and the problems can then manifest in ways that you never imagined.
So we look at that. I'm an investment professional by trade, and we look at human bias a lot as a study now in the investment industry, because of the importance it has. Someone thinks that they've thought of a good investment and they persuade themselves it is a good investment. And so investment industry uses a lot of psychology and behavioral psychology to try and understand that. Is that something that the tech industry is using? Because it seems almost diametrically opposed. It's the fuzzy human stuff completing with the geeky computer stuff. So is that something that the industry is moving towards then?
That's a great question. I don't know.
Should it, perhaps? So
it probably should.
Yeah.
But I think to help with the bias, you have to have diverse teams. You can't have the same group of people working on something, right? So you have to have people that come from wealthy backgrounds, from poorer backgrounds, from Black, white, Asian, all coming in, bringing their experiences in. And that's how you start to eliminate and reduce that bias in the technology. And so the technology becomes more fair and equitable across the board.
Well, you said something there, the diversity.
Yes.
I don't think many people who are listening to this show were going to be thinking there's a lot of diversity in the security industry and even in the IT industry generally.
That's why we're here. That's why the Women's Society of Cyber Jitsu exists, to help bring that diversity into the space, to help train people to know how to use the tools and to understand what they're doing when they're working in these different security companies and organizations, because it's important, right? We have to be conscious and do this intentionally. Otherwise, we're never going to move past where we're at. And that goes with any industry, not just security.
How do we persuade people that an industry which for so long has been considered quite a geeky industry, quite a male-dominated industry, more so than many, many others, in fact? How do we persuade people that the time is different and the opportunities exist?
You got to be visible. So we've been doing this for 10 years, showing that just having a presence of somebody that's Hispanic or Black or, you know, whatever, having that presence is helpful. And it shows that, hey, I see myself in that person, I can probably do that same thing. And then we offer the opportunities to try and get in. So, I mean, workshops, trainings, conferences like this, you know, I was surprised. I was like, oh, okay. But I come and I'm like, oh, there's a lot of different types of people here. It's a big group of folks. And I was like, okay, cool. But it's just about representation. It's about having people that look different than, no offense, guys.
She's looking at you and I here.
That look different helps others that are coming up after, especially, and older people too. We have a number of older women.
She's looking at you there.
You're not that old. But we have a number of older women that have come, they're career changers and they're trying to transition into cyber. They're needed too, so that other folks that want to transition from a previous career can see, oh, somebody else did it, I can probably do it too.
Well, I wanted to ask you about getting young people involved in this industry, young girls particularly involved in this industry, but you touched on something there about bringing older people in. Mm-hmm. A lot of people are very scared about the language involved in security and IT, and it just seems very complicated. A lot of older people struggle turning on a phone or turning on. So is it something that realistically people can transition into, or is it really as complicated as it's made out to be?
Depends on where you're transitioning to. You don't have to be a pen tester or a coder or any of that. If you were in an accounting company and you were an accountant, we need accounting and we need business on the cybersecurity side. We need people that can write, you know, people that can speak, people that can teach. You don't have to be technical to do that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have audit, compliance, you have all sorts of different aspects of it. The pen testing is what people tend to focus on, and that is such a
And when you say that, penetration testing.
Sorry,
you're
penetration
using
testing.
Ethical hacking.
well above my head.
Ethical hacking, yes.
Ethical hacking.
Yeah, and that's such a small microcosm of what we could do as an industry. Mm-hmm. And the other part of it is our industry is fairly immature in many ways, but immature as an industry, because you look at, you know, medical profession, legal profession, they've had hundreds of years precedent. We've had a couple of decades. So this is definitely something that is going to mature over time, and we are going to get to a better place. For example, when I went to conferences 20 years ago, there would not be a woman to be seen anywhere. If there was, it was like, wow, there's a woman here. nowadays, we actually will go to conferences, we'll start counting, we're like, oh, 60-40 split. I mean, compared to 20 years ago, it has improved. We have a long way to go. I don't have any hesitation about that. But I have seen progress.
There's actually lines at the bathroom at sub conferences now.
That's true, yes.
Because there's so many more coming into the space.
That's an interesting way of assessing something, isn't it? Because it proves that the numbers must be there.
Yep.
Something's happening.
When you go to schools, though, role models is still an important thing, isn't it? And a lot of Hollywood or TV is still quite male-dominated when you get to the geeks or the IT people in that room. There's still a lot of men in there. How do you change that perception? How do the role models become into this industry?
Yeah, that's a hard one. We have to step up and be a role model. You guys can be role models for women in the space, for young girls, for young...
It's never been accused of me having any potential to be a role model for anything, but I appreciate you trying.
But no, you know, by encouraging, by showing that they can do this. We can't control Hollywood, right? We can't control, but we see a lot of women in... nowadays in a lot of those different types of roles, forensic investigators and running things, running shops, and so that helps when they can see that. But we all have to not be afraid to step out there and say, I'm going to help you. I'm going to show you something that might change your life.
So when you go into a school, are you met with surprise, happiness, normalcy? What is it nowadays? Because that might have changed over the last 10 years.
Originally, it was, oh, there's somebody that looks like me. Because I don't like to wear khakis and stuff like that. I like to dress up and wear heels and be cute, have my nails done, red hair. And they're like, oh, somebody that doesn't look like the traditional hacker with a hoodie. I have a hoodie, but I wear it when I'm cold or on a plane. But they're like, oh, wow, I can do this. And you're giving them the opportunity to see that this is something that they could potentially do, right? Whether they go that route or not, it's just another avenue that they're able to, like, wrap their heads around and say, you know what? And then when you relate it to their phones and to social media and to the technology that they're using every day, they're like, oh. And then when you show them, Like, here's how you can crack passwords, and this is how you can, recover files that you may have lost. So that whole "my dog ate my homework" thing is non-existent.
I did successfully use that once in grade 6.
Your dog actually ate your homework, is what you're
I
saying.
didn't have a dog, though.
He didn't have a dog. He just didn't do it.
But to build on that as well is, like, my daughter's 14, and she's very much at that point where she's going, wait a second, where do I fit in? Because she's mixed race as well. And looking at, where she's looking for role models and things to that effect. And we have a lot of conversations about, hacking and social engineering and things like that. And she's gotten a little bit too good at it for my liking. So she's able to shoulder surf me when I'm working. And if I'm not
we like it, because she's going to be the next big one.
Yeah, she's going to be good.
We're going to take a break very shortly, but I want to catch up on that, because you said something there which I thought was quite interesting. Should parents be worried about allowing their kids to know too much about technology and therefore being hacked by their kids? Is that...
So I take your point, but honestly, the more the education they have and to use it in the right way.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Because far too many times you'll hear stories about a hacker getting caught by the police because they were trying something out of innate curiosity. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases...
Parents a lot of times couldn't supervise because they don't know what it is the kids are doing or how they go about doing it.
My life is a perfect example of that. My parents had absolutely no idea about technology whatsoever. And to this day, they still are unsure of what it is that I do. But yeah, being able to empower yourself as a parent to understand technology, at least at some level, or reach out to groups like yours to get more information to empower themselves so they can be able to have that conversation with their kids. Because things can go very, very badly with technology if they don't have the proper guidance.
Yeah. Well, look, we're going to take a short break and continue this conversation straight after. So please do stay with us and join us back in 1 minute.
As the longest established pensions plan in the Cayman Islands, the Chamber Pension Plan looks forward to delivering the same strong performance for our members, but now in a new location. As of March 1st, our new pensions operation office is located at 14 Saturn Close, Eastern Avenue, the same building as our new administrator's agent, Saxon Administration Limited. A dedicated and experienced team will be assigned to the Chamber Pension Plan. If you would like to join or request further information, visit chamberpension.ky. And for information as it happens, follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram. Email admin@pensions.ky or call 745-7630. The Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan. New location, new administrator's agent, new customer service, same strong performance.
Money Sense, the only personal finance radio show in the Cayman Islands, hosted by Simon Caudry from the CFA Society Cayman Islands.
This is Money Sense.
Welcome back to Money Sense and our conversation on IT security with Mary Galloway and Dave Lewis. Well, in the first half of the show, you gave us, I think, Mary, you gave us your perspective on what the future might hold, and you mentioned that artificial intelligence was important. I'm not sure I got your answer, Dave, on where you think the future is, or perhaps what worries you about the future and what we need to focus on. So perhaps give us your perspective there.
So from my perspective, security resilience is a big part of the conversation that has to happen, because far too often you have systems that are built out where companies say, oh, it's built to 5 nines of uptime, where there's a chunk of time that they're willing to accept as being down for their systems. And in this day and age, it's really not something that you have to have. You can have your systems be up 100% of the time if you architect them properly. And if we're building resilience into our systems, be it authentication, security control, whatever it happens to be, you're looking to future-proof that, because as we look at the various storm events around the world, kinetic warfare, all these things, we have to find ways that we can build our systems so they will outlast any major impact event of any nature. So if we're able to do that and allow for these systems to continue operating, that's a really big piece of the puzzle, because historically, if a system went down, that company would be offline for X number of days. Or if a banking system went down, internet banking as an example, how much money are you losing for every minute, every hour, every day it's down? That's a significant amount of money. And it doesn't have to be that with the technologies that are available around the world today in various vendors.
I guess there's an interesting analogy there, drawing it back to the investment industry. Robinhood is a big broker, and they were down when things were going a little bit too exciting and their systems just went offline. So that's preventable, you're saying? It's just simply badly set up?
I can't speak to that particular situation.
Those sorts of things should be preventable.
Yeah, theoretically, obviously, there's outliers to any one of these conversations for sure.
What about ransomware? People pay you lots of I think when I was growing up, it was always government policy, you never pay ransoms. And now it seems as though I'll just go and pay the ransom and get the data back.
That doesn't always work, though, because there are times where you pay the ransom and they just take the money and leave, and you don't get a decryption key. And there's other times where they'll give you the decryption key, but the code is so horribly written by Muppets that it will take literally 7 years before it would ever decrypt.
Kermit is rolling over in his grave. You just insulted Kermit there.
Exactly. Well,
he might be the world's best coder for all we know.
That's true. He could well be. But ransomware really is the debt collector for security debt, and this is one of those conversations where it's like, a lot of the times the ransomware, the reason it's working is because of deprecated code, of configuration issues, things that were imminently preventable. Not always, of course, but a vast majority of it is old legacy code issues that have not been remediated.
I think you mentioned to me before we commenced this show about security debt within an organization. I think it sounds to me as though that might be connected to what you've just said, but we're not understanding it enough. I wanted to ask, is it, and what is it?
Okay, so any organization that has any sort of IT function, basically every organization, they have some sort of technological debt, which is systems that are old and outdated in some cases, but not necessarily presenting as a security issue for the organization. Once it crosses that line, either by virtue of time or interaction with other systems, or a new vulnerability is discovered, then that becomes a security debt issue for that organization that could have a severe negative impact. Heartbleed, which happened about 6 or 7 years ago, the Log4j, which happened just over Christmas, these were issues in code that really heavily impacted quite a lot of organizations. And there was a lot of firefighting that had to be done to remediate those issues at the risk of being compromised by a nefarious third party.
Well, so let's take not a typical, but let's just imagine an organization which has been staffed by a group of security people, and they themselves will have biases. Back to our earlier conversation, they will think they've bought good stuff. Right. They will think they've organized it properly. How does an organization become true with itself to say, have we actually got things organized properly? Because the people who are often capable of answering that are the people who put in the stuff in the first place. So how do you persuade an organization to be honest about, or how can an organization be honest about its standing?
Audits.
But audits by whom?
So it depends on the industry. If you're bound by PCI DSS for credit cards, then there's audits for that. If you're bound by medical laws or anything like that, those things have policies and procedures and steps that you can use to help make sure that your systems and your applications and your tools are as secure as they can be, right? Constantly monitoring. So it's one thing to put the stuff in place, right? And then you leave it, but you got to monitor it once you get it in there. You can't just set it and forget it. And you have to have a team of people that are invested in making sure that the stuff is secure. You got to have the bosses, you got to have the stakeholders that are a part of the organization that have a vested interest in making sure that whatever data we're protecting stays protected.
But that means you've got to educate the people who are sometimes uneducatable because it's just not their thing. They're going to say, I'm too distracted with other things. I'm a busy person. I run the company. I haven't got time for this. How do you get over that hurdle? Well,
if you want your name plastered across the news and you want millions of dollars gone, I think you better make some time for that.
So that's good. That's an interesting way. It's not so much you're not scaring people, but you are in a sense. You're not going out of your way to scare people.
Right.
You're saying the outcome, if you don't take this seriously, is bad publicity or it's ransoms.
Yeah, and these security teams have a fiduciary responsibility to protect their organizations,
right? And
that rolls up to senior management of the C-suite, who actually owns all of the risks. And there's a lot of organizations that don't fully understand where risk lies within that organization, and making sure that they are taking the time to better protect those systems is absolutely essential because the knock-on effect is extreme. Audits that go horribly wrong and financial penalties that result from that. And being able to have the wherewithal to ask questions. Mm-hmm. So not only from audit committees, but talking to trusted partners that you may be working with, whoever that happens to be, and making sure that you're able to pick a partner that's going to do right by you. Back in the day when the world was flat, I used to work for a power company, and anytime we wanted a new product for a large deployment, we would actually operate through a third party that would act as a front for us. So they would deal with all the vendors. So the vendors had never had any idea who the customer was. So that way we could do a bake-off of all the different systems, look at how they performed, and pick the one that was right for the outcomes for our organization that we were trying to achieve to satisfy the aspirations of the business.
A few of the things that you said here have struck me as being, and I don't want this to be controversial, I want to finish my sentence before it feels as though I'm insulting you. I feel as though that they're designed or linked towards bigger organizations that have their own infrastructure, whereas a lot of smaller companies perhaps think of themselves as, I'm actually going to be okay because I've outsourced it to the cloud, I've outsourced it to other people. How do you persuade people that's not true? You're laughing at me, which means you definitely don't think it's true. But how do you explain that? How do you respond to that when people think that?
Every organization can be a target. People want data. Data is value. They can sell the data to bad guys to do whatever it is that they do. Bad guys or girls, excuse me, to do whatever that is that they do, to sell it on the black market or those philosophical places. You have to break it down. When it comes to smaller businesses, you have to break it down from a cost perspective, I think, to say, hey, if you don't do this, it's going to cost you this much every single month that you don't do it. For a small business, that could be detrimental. For a small business, $1 million because you didn't do something could crash your business. You could go out of business. I mean, look what happened during COVID. Same thing. A lot of businesses went under because they couldn't adjust to the time. They couldn't move from being totally on-prem, brick and mortar to virtual. It's the same concept.
But it's quite difficult for a small business, isn't it, to have anybody or have enough people or anybody who has the competence to know what it is they're looking for.
Yep. And it's okay to outsource to companies to help, but you still need to be involved in those conversations. You still need to know what's going on. You still need to be aware of where there's holes, all of that stuff, because just because somebody else is managing your data, you're still responsible for it.
So I guess what I'm hearing from you is if you're sort of saying to a small business, don't be naive to assume that just because you've used service providers that everything's fine. You still got to know. Right. You got to do some research. They
could get hacked.
Yeah.
They could get popped.
So you kind of need to hire a consultant to help you out to make sure, just to do a review,
right.
to go back to your audit.
An audit, right?
Yeah, you have to hire smart people that can help facilitate the conversation with trusted third parties, whatever that happens to be. Because there's no organization out there that has a team that can do everything. I mean, it's just not tenable, or that'd be a lot of money to pay for that team. But if you have good people that can ask the right questions, and then you can have that further conversation, that will go a long way to help improving the matter.
Yeah. Now we have a couple of minutes left in the show, and I can't end a show about IT security without, at the very least, mentioning the word blockchain. And I saw you trying to run for the exit there. But before you do, if we think of the purity of what blockchain is, it's about cryptography and using that as a way to record things and to store things in a sense. This may not be the world's best explanation. I'm not talking here about cryptocurrencies, I'm not talking about coins and other such things, but is there a place for blockchain type of technology in the security landscape? Should people think of it in that way? How should people think of blockchain in your view? As a tool, what is it?
It's a distributed ledger, and unfortunately the term and the technology has been muddied enough by various parties out there that it has gotten to the point where it is more confusion than it should be. Mm-hmm. If you're looking in your toolbox, it's another hammer, is the easiest way to put it. There's nothing really magical about it. It's not going to sprinkle it on your servers and everything's going to be fine. It is simply just one more technology tool that's available to organizations to use.
What about from your perspective? Because it seems as though if you're talking to young kids, they would know of that as opposed to some of the more complex IT stuff. So they would have heard of blockchain at the very least. Is it a way to get people interested in the technology or in the cyber industry?
So I don't know if the kids will know about blockchain unless it's through crypto. They're not going to know what that technology, like the underlying technology of it is. I don't really think it's a way to get into cyber. It's just another solution, another thing that we can potentially use. I haven't really seen any security things around blockchain really, because that's not where I think it's great, right? But it's not my thing.
Yeah, the only time I've seen actual great deployments from it was with relation to supply chain, like for food supply chain or managing fishing nets in the North Sea.
Yeah, I think Maersk were trying to, one of the large container companies, they were trying to put little labels on things and then be able to tell people that something had arrived and yes, it's the right thing. But it's still, it's been talked about for almost a decade, right? Yeah. And yet there still aren't many products. That's what sort of seems to confuse
because it wasn't talked about from that perspective. It was literally talked about from the currency perspective.
Right.
I mean, Dubai was doing a couple of years ago.
Does that frustrate you?
I don't know.
We're in security. We're frustrated by default.
Right, all the time. It doesn't really matter. But I mean, there are countries that are trying to use that technology, the blockchain technology, to make their cities better and smarter. So there's definitely a possibility for it. I think once it starts to become a little bit more mature, I think there's definitely going to be some possibility. But
because one of the things that I suppose keeps a lot of people awake at night is the fear of their personal data being exposed to others, and
it's already exposed.
Okay, so your fears at night are well founded. Don't stop fearing them. It's already happened. You're saying. I
mean, unless you're like living under a rock someplace, there's literally a data breach every single day. Every single day.
Right. I always like to end the show on a happy note, so I appreciate that.
So continue to protect yourself. Continue to read up on security things and kind of understand, at least from the personal perspective, even if you don't come to work in the industry, and just try to be careful. Don't reuse your same passwords across everything. Typical stuff.
Yeah, you have to advocate for yourself. If you don't know, ask the questions. And if they don't know that, find somebody who can give you good information.
So be smart enough to know how dumb you are, in a sense.
Yeah. I built a career on it.
Right.
Excellent. Look, both of you. That's a good try. Mary and Dave, thank you both for your time today. Thank you both for coming to the Cayman Islands, first of all. I hope you're going to enjoy some of what Cayman has to offer, some of the nature out here, the stingrays perhaps, the warm water, the sunshine. No casinos, I'm afraid.
That's fine. I don't gamble, so.
Oh.
I just live there. Oh. I used to work at a casino, so that's why.
Well, there you go. That wasn't a conversation I thought I'd be having. But thank you again for joining us. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
So my final note is just to remind our listeners that this show will be available as a podcast on the CFA Society webpage in a few days, and encourage you, if you have any question or topic that you wish us to cover, send us an email to @moneysense@candw.ky or tweet us @MoneySenseRadio. With that, thank you once again, and do tune in 2 weeks' time to Money Sense.
Money Sense is brought to you by the Chamber Pension Plan. For further information, visit chamberpension.ky.
The Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan is kicking off the new year with a new website to better serve our members and a new administrator's agent that will help fulfill our vision for your pension plan. Our website, chamberpension.ky, features improved web services like a real-time chat to help answer your questions quicker and audio tips to help you plan for your retirement savings arrangement. Our new administrator's agent, Saxon Administration Limited, will benefit members through enhanced systems and IT services, allowing for a greater customer service experience. The Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan. We're here for you. If you would like to join or request further information, visit chamberpension.ky. And for information as it happens, follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram. Email admin@pensions.ky or call 745-7630.